Have you ever wondered about light and dark, good and evil in your spiritual journey? And can one work with the light and still know darkness? Join me in this episode for a conversation with Oshada, who is a medium, a spiritual minister, and has plenty of training in the shamanic traditions. She will be talking about her recent book, which is a memoir. It's called My Life Among Spirits, where she talks in detail about her training in mediumship and her shamanic training with the Lakota healers of Pine Ridge in South Dakota.
Welcome to the Angelscapes podcast, where you're encouraged to uncover and develop a direct connection with your soul's power, wisdom, and spiritual intuition that is ready to blossom. We'll explore new ideas, compelling tips, and real steps to help you learn simple spiritual practices. We're a safe place to learn more about accessing your soul's power with education and spiritual wholeness that could bring more clarity to your life. Now here's your host, a practicing medium, Akashic Records practitioner, spirit artist, coach, and mentor, Dr. Reverend Nancy Smith.
Oshada is a spiritualist minister. She's been around for a while, studying all of these different modalities and bringing them together. She has had unquenchable thirst for spiritual enlightenment, and that took her into the Lakota of the Pine Ridge in South Dakota. So welcome. I'm so excited that you're on the show today, Oshada. And I guess I kind of wanted to start off the podcast talking about how you had one foot in one world and one foot in the other. And what were your observations? Would you?
Well, yeah. Thank you, Nancy. First of all, it's good to be here. Yes. Well, I came into spiritualism in the late 70s with the Swampscott Church of Spiritualism. I think it was 1979. And I had a lot of experiences and training within spiritualism, both here in America and in Great Britain. And my late partner was half Lakota, and we were invited to come out to Pine Ridge Reservation and live and study with a Lakota medicine family out there. And I know when I first went out, I was very surprised because I had always associated spiritual abilities, mediumship, healing. I'd always associated that with spiritual unfoldment. I associated that with the higher vibrations of being close to God, the creator, the great spirit, whatever word you choose to use. And what I discovered is that people can have abilities without being spiritual necessarily. Now, that's not always the case. Like in the Lakota ceremonies, there's a tremendous commitment to spirituality, but it's energy. It's working with energy, and energy is neutral. It's just like somebody could be a phenomenal concert pianist, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're a good human being. Somebody could do, many things. One could be extremely accomplished in many areas, just like one could be extremely accomplished in working with energy without necessarily seeking the higher vibrations. And what I learned about being out on Pine Ridge is that it's really about learning to work with raw power and raw energy. I hope that answers your question.
Well, it brings up even more questions, but I didn't get the 70s. Like, oh my gosh, there was so many things were popping in the 70s. So many things were starting to happen. I was still in high school. And so, but the quote that I took from the book from Gordon Higginson talks about the most important responsibility of a medium is being between them and God. They must get close to God and unlock the divine within themselves and work in the greatest good in the universe, and the rest will follow. Now, he said that, and then you went to the reservation and saw this raw power, and you saw a lot of people, the Lakota people, being very generous with their whole physical body. The physicality of the healing that was happening actually was taking a toll on the main healer. And then, but there were people that were coming that were not coming from their best. And we always see people coming from wherever they are.
Yes.
So where I was going with this was, you had said it doesn't matter. You can be a very good pianist, but you could be an ugly person. And I feel that you were alluding to the fact that you can have these talents and still have maybe not that higher vibration with God, or not have the clearest relationship with God, or we know mediums who don't have a spiritual practice. And Gordon Higgins has said it was so very important, and yet people are still doing the mediumship work, still doing the work, still doing healing work with needing, and they're working with different kinds of
Yes.
colors of light.
Yes.
That way.
Well, this is why I've always come back to spiritualism. I mean, I was trained I am trained as a medium, but I was trained and I was raised, so to speak, within the system of the spiritualist churches. And I agree completely with Gordon Higginson that you have to know God. And I use the word God broadly, whatever definition people have, but you have to be able to connect with source energy and the higher vibration and know yourself first before you attempt to learn the craft, so to speak, of mediumship. And I see this, you see this more and more today. It used to be, now I've been practicing mediumship for over 40 years at this point, and it used to be most of the mediums were associated with spiritualist churches in one way or another, and their gifts were aligned for the greater good. And you then started seeing the churches going through a lot of changes, and you had more and more people who started studying mediumship outside of the confines of the spiritualist churches. So I can remember teaching development classes and having students saying, I'd say, well, why do you want to do a medium? Why do you want to unfold? And there was one young woman that I worked with for a while, and she used to say, well, I want to be a professional medium. And I would say, wrong answer. Being a professional medium is not the reason. And in my understanding and my belief is that I do this work because I'm called to do it, because I am serving the greater good. And I am not determining which aspect of mediumship will unfold. I feel like my guides and a greater presence, source energy, is always doing the leading and the guiding. And I am surrendering to this influence. I am agreeing to this influence. I'm not choosing and saying, hey guys, we're going to do it this way. It's like, no, I'll listen to what you're suggesting and we'll go that way. And so you now see a lot of professional mediums that are very divorced or separated from the idea of the principles of spiritualism, the principles of working really for the highest good. And it is the faculty of mediumship, the faculty of psychism. Those are skills that can be developed. Somebody has the chemistry and the ability to do that, they can do that. But I think it leads to a different kind of reading and a different kind of interaction with the spirit world.
Well, it does. You're tuning in. The person is the radio tuning in. So if you have a certain bandwidth, that's what you're going to pick up on.
Yeah.
Spirit, that's what I always heard or thought of it as in terms of that. But I also have seen in different churches, different traditions of teaching mediumship, where one church would go through, and I'm not naming churches, but would have to do the spiritualist training first. You'll have to do the understand the healing prayer, understand the principles, understand what it is you're stepping into, and then you graduate from that, and then you can go into the mediumship. And other churches will just start people, I want to learn mediumship, and they don't worry about the principles and everything. They just start teaching to the people who want to be mediums, that may necessarily be members of the church or spiritualists. And I do see that has been going on for years. I've seen it going on for 20 years or so. And then you'll see the ramifications of it.
Yes. Yeah, well, what I've seen in the churches over the years is that um, I feel like I feel like my grandparents saying in the old day when I used to walk to school, in the snow 20 miles, but in
Was
the
it go both
old
ways?
days, right? But back when the person who was the pastor of the church was usually the person who was the best medium. They were really known for being a powerful medium, a powerful healer, that they had a really strong connection and they would demonstrate. And when you studied with them, you sat with their band, their spirits, and you were able to evolve. It's like when I was fortunate enough to go over to the Arthur Findlay College and study with Gordon Higginson, there was one point where he called me up on the platform with him. So I was inside the umbrella of his energy. And of course, it elevated my mediumship. But once that happened, I had that body memory for it, like riding a bicycle. Once you learn to ride a bicycle, your body has a memory for it. So it was always the most esteemed mediums who used to be the pastors of the churches. And then those people transitioned to the spirit side of life, and things started changing so that the people oftentimes now who take over the pastorships are people who maybe do some healing but are more administrators and are not really um, the mediumship is lagging for the most part. I'm speaking in generalities. So it's very difficult to keep on maintaining this level of a high quality of mediumship when you don't have people doing that, or it's not available. And you had, you like in the greater Boston area, you had the North Shore churches. The Salem church was always sort of the keynote church, and if you were invited to work at the Salem church, that was saying something. And then you had the Plymouth church with the Hardings, and there again, and they before them were the Custances, and it's just a long tradition. And I think that mediumship has become more and more separated from the idea of being close to source energy, really surrendering to the wisdom and the higher vibrations of our guides. There are many people who do that, but there's been a separation with the growing of professional mediums, as if that were a career, and it has become a career. So but then again, readings have changed over the years as well. Used to be the standard that when you gave a reading, you gave all this very hardcore evidence. You gave names, you gave license plate numbers, telephone numbers, very specific, concrete information, but the emotional connection was not there. And now I see the trend in mediumship is to really establish more of that heart connection. I know when I do readings, my goal is that the client feels like they've had a visit with their loved ones. I want them to feel that power, to feel the energy. I want to be the conduit for that love. So I see you shaking your head because I know we're in agreement on that.
It's not a bad progression in any means, because people want that connection that they've lost.
Yes.
And so if you do both, that's terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't have to be a spiritualist to be a medium, or to be psychic, or to be able to do trance work. But I think it who you are as an individual, to me, comes through in one's work.
Yeah.
And when I lived out on Pine Ridge, in the CHIPS camp, I saw a whole different brand of spirit communication. The medicine man was referred to as a spiritual interpreter, and the spirits would often speak in another language, and there were great similarities between doing physical work on the reservation and physical work in Great Britain or in the United States. A lot of similarities, But the relationship with the spirit world was more transactional. It wasn't just because the spirits love humanity and they want to work through you to be of service for the greater whole. There was a trade that was done, and that's very common in shamanism, where there's this trading going on.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this transactional with spirit. It sounds, because it puts a spirit to me a whole different personality. So I want you to clarify that a little bit. What kind of transactions was spirit looking for?
Well, the medicine man works with a very specific altar, so it has to be set up meticulously. All the elements have to be done very specifically. There are certain colors, there are certain flags, there are certain prayer ties, large numbers of them, hundreds and hundreds of them, that are done for ceremonies. And things like a feast is provided for after the ceremony, and the feast had to be cooked and prepared in a certain way so that the food that was used couldn't be food that was used for human transaction, or the ceremony might not happen. So there were separate salt shakers and pepper shakers for seasoning, as an example. The salt shaker you used for your scrambled eggs in the morning wasn't the same salt shaker you used when you were preparing a stew for the ceremony. And in the same way, if you were cooking a stew and some splatter fell on the stove and you took your finger and wiped it and licked it, well, then you couldn't use that food for the ceremony.
Because there was a transaction there.
Yeah, so it's very, very, because that food is offered to the spirits and is brought in during the ceremony, covered with tin foil and arranged, and the spirits actually alight on it. You can hear them dancing on it.
I was reading that in the book. You hear tick, 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 as they went across the top.
Yeah, in the ceremony house, the women sit, you sit with our backs up against a wall and our knees off together and our legs to the side. And you have to make sure you keep your knees back, because the food is lined up in front of the women, about a foot or two out from the women. And you can hear the spirits literally like they're poking fingers at the tin foil. So it's very different in those terms, that there are elements that have to be done. There are specific songs that are sung. There are ways that the medicine man is treated. If any of those elements are off, either the medicine man and his family will suffer, other people will suffer, or the ceremony will be canceled. So it's a different type of preparation. It's a different mentality. So you're trading in a way. You're creating these gifts, or this altar and this entire ceremony in a very, very specific way. And I think for outsiders, that was very difficult to comprehend, because, like most Anglos, people come out, I came out, and I learned very quickly not to make suggestions, not to think that I could do something better, not to think that this should be changed and this would make it easier. I learned to really just be quiet and do as I'm told. When I was out on the reservation, it was sort of the height of the feminist movement, and women came out and had strong ideas. I mean, outside of the reservation, I mean, I've marched for the passage of the ERA, for Roe versus Wade. I was very much a part of that, but on the reservation, it was different. There's an energetic balance that needs to be maintained, and female and male have a certain energy. And it's very different from thinking that this is sexism, or that there's, women are delegated to another role that's less than. And that's not the way it is at all. It really isn't. But you have to open your entire mindset and be open to really understanding and grasping the energy, the feminine and the masculine energies.
I want to take a really short break and just talk about, you can reach Oshada at oshada.com, her website. And I wanted to tell you, her book, My Life Among the Spirits, will also be on her website under oshada.com/memoir. And I really recommend, it's a great read, and it has information in the book that is nowhere else that I've ever seen. It's very specific with her studying spiritualism and very specific with her study with the Lakota tradition. And there are some hair-raising stories in there, so it's highly entertaining. And
Yeah.
I don't
It's
how many
available on Amazon. I mean, anybody can just Google it, but yeah.
but yeah, she's going to be doing a 2-hour webinar on death, dying, and continued life, with HMS, which is the Helpers Mentoring Society, which is connected to the Lakota lineage teachings. And is this seminar open to people? Is it
Yes.
on your website?
It'll be on their website, and as soon as the date has been shifted for different reasons, but as soon as I have information, I can send it to you, as a link or whatever. But it'll be on the Helpers Mentoring Society website. Yes.
Not on your, are you going to throw it on your website, do you suppose? Or if people went
Pardon?
to oshada.com, will it be on that website?
Yeah. Well, I can include it on that. It'll be on my Oshada Psychic Medium page on Facebook.
Facebook is a great way to
Yeah.
keep up.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really easy to find OSH for those who aren't familiar with you. So thank you for letting me take that little bit of a break. I wanted to come back with a question about the meticulous setup of the altar. I know that in spiritualism, there is not a central focus like an altar. In my studying with the Quechua people, there was it was focused on the mesa, but it was also an altar was an energetic space. And you mentioned in the book that the healer, the healing man, the healing I don't know if they call themselves shamans or they're just medicine men.
Medicine men. Lakota do not use the word shaman. Medicine men, yeah.
Because I just thought shaman was from another culture, but they go through the portal that's built on their altar to connect with spirit. And I thought that was fascinating. And what do you know about that? Could you explain that a little bit?
Well, during the ceremony, you're changing consciousness and you're changing worlds. There are worlds within worlds within worlds. And, even if you study just basic shamanism, like core shamanism that Michael Harner taught for years and Sandy Ingerman teaches, with core shamanism, you understand that there's a lower world, an upper world, and a middle world. The middle world would be our common reality, but it would be seen from a shamanic state of consciousness. So by use of the drum, or in different cultures, a didgeridoo or other musical instruments, one enters into this trance-like state, which is a shamanic state of consciousness. So you start seeing the worlds looking differently. And I'll give you an example. When I used to live in Swampscott, Massachusetts, there was an intersection near the grocery store. It was like a 4-corner area. And there were a lot of accidents that kept happening in that intersection. And one day I did a shamanic journey to look at, in the middle world, I traveled to this place looking at this area to see what is going on. Why are there so many accidents there? And how the journey played out was that I saw this huge elephant sitting in the middle of the road there, and the elephant was injured. So as part of the shamanic journey, one would then have their power animal, call in their power animal, figure out how to bring aid to this elephant to help. You wouldn't just say, get off the road. You would figure out how to help the elephant if it had a broken leg or if it had a thorn in its foot or whatever it was. You would do the healing work that was necessary to help this elephant so then it would get off the road. And, the accidents stopped happening in this area. This is energetic. It's energy on a different level, and it's working within different worlds. In the book, I talk about at one point I was out on the Seneca reservation and I was working with grandmother Uenade, Twyla Nietzsche, and I was in a back field when all of a sudden my ankle exploded and I fell. And I didn't trip on anything. There was nothing that I tripped on. I literally just, I felt like something yanked at my foot and I fell down and my ankle exploded. And I found a stick. I hobbled back to the house and she said, well, where exactly did this happen? And I told her exactly where it happened. And she started apologizing to me. And she said, well, that area right there is where the gas line was cut off to the people of the reservation. Because on the Seneca reservation, she lived on the Cattaraugus reservation, which translates to foul-smelling riverbanks, because the riverbanks are filled with gas, and the gas company harnessed the gas, but the pipeline stopped there, and it wasn't available to people on the reservation. And she said, a lot of resentments have built up in that area. And she said, we will be doing healing ceremonies to release those resentments. And when I looked into that whole situation, and on a shamanic level, I saw two snakes coming out of the ground and in combat with each other and grabbing my foot and twisting it. And, so ceremonies were done that night. There was a friend of hers who was a bone doctor. A lot of Native cultures have medicine people who work in a specific way. And he was a bone doctor, and he took my hand in his foot, my foot in his hand, and he didn't really touch it or manipulate it anyway. He sang to it. He burned herbs and he sang to my foot. I was so exhausted, I went to sleep. And then by the next morning, my foot, it was back to normal size. It wasn't black and blue anymore. And the energy had shifted. So it's about learning to work with the energies. And back to your question, the altar is very specific. There are spirit-given ceremonies and there are human-given ceremonies. So the most powerful altars come from fasting and praying and spending time with the spirits, where the spirits directly give you an altar to work with. And the people that I lived with, it was a strong lineage that dated back generations. Oops, I'm just losing you here. Okay, sorry about that. And, he worked with, Godfrey Chips worked with a spirit-given altar. So this altar, when the spirits were called upon, they could manipulate the energy or work through this energy to shift consciousness. And when people do, I'm switching a little bit, but like in shamanic societies, when the shaman goes on a journey for healing purposes, they may go a very long way. There's 7 levels in the lower world, 7 levels in the upper world. They may go on a very long journey. They always work with a spiritual partner that they make a commitment to, that they will come back, to this, or to this reality, to this timeline, to this time and space. Because when you separate and go out into the cosmos, into different energetic fields, into different levels of consciousness, it's easy to stay there and not come back. And, there's a lot of overlapping here with potential for mental illness and what happens with schizophrenics and psychosis. So the medicine man's chemistry is such that he can withstand this change in consciousness. And not everybody can withstand that change in consciousness. So the people who are in the ceremony supporting the medicine man, we're all singing. There's a drum, we're singing specific songs, and we're allowed to go to the edge of that consciousness, but not to go all the way into it. Whereas he travels into another world, another level of consciousness, which is very esoteric sounding. And it's a spiritual dimension that is that is there. And it requires, he usually works with family members or with other strong supporters who understand the ceremony, because we are the ones who call him back when he is functioning on these plates of consciousness or planes of consciousness that are beyond human understanding for the most part. So it is like going through the door. Oftentimes we say in spiritualism that death is like going from one room, walking from one room into another. You go through a door. Well, the altar is the doorway. It creates the doorway that the medicine man goes through to speak with the spirits on a different level, because he's really dealing with elemental powers. He's not dealing with, well, first of all, he's not dealing at all with, like, some people really, their dad is in spirit and their dad is their guide. He's operating at a much different level. He's even operating at a much different level than you might have masters that work with you. He's working with elemental powers. I guess that's the best way I can explain it.
You brought it to a beautiful opening, which brings me to feel the difference between working from a spiritualist, which you feel like you prefer that world than the world that the medicine men were in, that when they went to these different dimensions. And you often in the book talk about they came back with information that they couldn't quite share, or they didn't quite know how to share about the person that but they brought the information through that person needed. And it was often a burden for them to know more than they could say.
Well, yes, I'm sure there are times when you do a reading with any of us, who practice this, who do a reading where we see things, and it's not ours to share some of that information. We share as much as we can. But with Medicine Man and his altar, Godfrey had a front row seat to human suffering, to the depth and depravity of human suffering. So he saw things, and he knew things, and he knew things about future unfolding of things. He could foresee the gift of prophecy. And so it was not, he would share with people what he was told he could share, but the Lakota way isn't to spell things out for you. It's about you paying attention to the cues that are given, paying attention to nature, the environment, paying attention to the promptings of your own soul and your own soul's journey, and moving in a certain direction rather than being told this is what you must do. So it's very different, but there are certain ceremonies that have to do with gaining knowledge, and a person would put up a ceremony to gain knowledge. If they have a question, it might be like, should they do a vision quest? Or it could be about a healing. It could be about a lost object. It could be about anything. And so some of that information would be shared, some of it wouldn't be shared. And it could be frustrating at times, but, and with the healing work, there was always this understanding that the sickness originated with the soul, that it was a soul sickness. So in different people, dependent on your genetics, depending on your diet, depending on your belief system, all different factors in your life, the illness in a human being could show up in a different way. For some people, it might show up as a cancer. For some people, it might show up as a heart disease. For some people, might show up as broken bones or death or loss. And it's all about healing that depth, the depth of illness that resides in the soul or in the spirit, and really having a change of consciousness. Because I saw incredible things healed out there. This would have been back in the 80s, where there was very little hope for men who had HIV or AIDS. And there was a young man who came out who I knew, and we had brought him out, and he had AIDS, and he was cured. He was cured. I mean, and that was very unusual, because most of the medicine men, the spirits that they work with, understand the etiology of the diseases that were part of their people, part of their nation, not these outside diseases which weren't part of their culture. So with the medicine men, there are different degrees. And as each year, as they go to the sacred mountain and they fast, or they're buried in the earth and they do what you would call a vision quest, powers are increased, but it's always sacrifice to gain these powers. So this young man was cured of AIDS. And like I said, illnesses manifest in different ways, but it's always about being out of balance. It's being about, ill at ease within ourselves. And sometimes people have gotten so far away from their true nature and who they're supposed to be as human beings, that the illness has entrenched too deeply to be reversed.
It's always a heartbreak,
Yeah.
because the change, that the deep seated change isn't possible, or they're not. I also read in the book people not willing to do what you need to do. And many people came to do the ceremony but couldn't complete it and had to leave. And the completion, it was weeks of preparation for
Yes.
these and ceremonies where they didn't always know clearly what they were supposed to do, and so they'd have to do it a few times before they got it. And it was like a breaking down of somebody's I don't want to say their spirit, but their mental
Resistance. They're resistant, and their ego. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. By the time you get till it's actually your night for your ceremony, you're crying, you're destroyed, you're pretty much you've given up, you've let go of a lot of the things you've been holding on to. And it's true that sometimes the healing comes, but you're not willing to make the changes. I you have, I'm just giving an example. You have a 45-year-old man who, maybe weighs 300 pounds, and he drinks whiskey every day, and he eats, a pound of meat every day, raw steak. He eats steak every day, big copious amounts of it. Are you really surprised when he has a heart attack? I mean, it's like, well, it's kind of the antithesis of everything one should do, not to have a heart attack. So somebody puts up a ceremony if they get through that process, but they're not willing to perhaps not just change their diet, or perhaps give up alcohol, or do those physical things, but they're not willing to let go of perhaps resentments, or seek forgiveness in their life, or change their attitudes on a deep level. It's about being willing to let go of the attachment to the ego and really work in harmony with nature and not against nature. So the obvious things like not drinking, that's just the outer layer of the onion.
Well, it is. And also the when people rely so heavily on the drinking or the eating or the thing as creating nurturing and sustenance, that it's an illusion for themselves, because they can't create the true, they're missing the power. They're not in their powers.
They're not. Yeah.
And so the idea of giving those things up when they think that's what's keeping them alive is terrifying.
It's very terrifying. Yeah. But you have to think, if somebody's going to make a journey out to the middle of nowhere on this bleak reservation,
No,
and
but
they're going to go through all these, they're going to put themselves through all that they put themselves through. Something inside of them is calling them to do it. And it's an enormous blessing to have the privilege to do that. You know, those places to go like that are far and fewer between. You know, when Godfrey died and Philip died and Charles, his brothers, crossed over to the spirit side of life, the medicine, that lineage, a part of that lineage stopped. And successive generations are completely immersed in alcohol and drug abuse. And it's very, very sad. It's heartbreaking.
That was the sad ending in the book when you talk about, and I really have a hard question to ask you, is with all these the training and the years of immersion, and plus, you know, you have your other ministerial practice within the spiritualist tradition, where you've written this amazing book. Where are you taking it next?
Where am I taking it next? Well, Helpers Mentoring Society is run by Sal Giancarelli, who wrote the afterword in my book. And Sal came out to the reservation right after my partner Jody and I left. So he studied and lived with Godfrey Chips and the family for a very long time, and was given permission to teach and to teach the lineage teachings, which he does through the Helpers Mentoring Society, which I've been involved in for several years. And where, to me, you know, I did a lot of these things. I was much younger. I am going to be 74 next month, and my bones, my bones cannot handle the life that they once handled. So I'm trying to bring this wisdom into my private practice and working with people. And I find that so much of the work that I do is just with people who are really in need. I work a lot with people who are dealing with death and bereavement. I work a lot with people who are preparing for the journey to the other side, helping them. I do a lot of work with the deeper states of trance and healing work. So wherever the spirits send me, wherever they call to me, they were the ones who insisted that I write the book. They said, it's time. It's time. And I got it from several places. I had a dream where one of the Chips brothers came to me.
And
And
saved too. He did visit us.
Yes. That's you know, an amazing thing. It's funny. I just read an account of that. There's an anthropologist. He's gone to the spirit side of life, William Lyon, and he lived with the Lakota for a long time. And one of his books is pretty much out of print. And somebody sent me a page from his book recently where he writes a paragraph about the girl under the trailer house.
That was you.
That was me. Yes, and there were some inaccuracies in his story, but basically anybody out on Pine Ridge, I just have to say to them, I'm the girl who's under the trailer. Oh, we know you. We know you. So
No, you.
yeah. And it's a miracle that I wasn't killed, that I wasn't crushed. Philip Chips, the youngest brother, was the one who really saved me. People can read about it in the book, but you know, he was the one who came to me in the dream time and said, the family saved you for a reason. And you know, I've worked for years with Colin Bates, who I adore. He's been a mentor and he's a colleague, and you know, I just adore him. And Colin said, well, you have to do it. You have to do it, you know. And he said, no, you need to write your life story. And Colin wrote the foreword for the book. And I just, at this point in life, I go where I'm called. I feel, right now I'm working on another book with death and dying. I feel like that's really my calling. I've done hospice work, but working with that transition called death and helping people understand that life continues on after the change called death, and how to deal with grief, because people are very broken, and people don't know how to manage grief. We are a society that is filled with displaced grief and trauma. So being able to alleviate some of that suffering and work with people, um, to understand the nature of being a human being and what it means to live and what it means to die, and that death is just a part of life, is really my calling. So, I will be writing more books, I think.
Good to hear. I put down the book and I said, this is the beginning of something. And I had to say this during the podcast. Oshada, that's the beginning of something.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited to see
I-
what you will be coming up next.
I've been told that I'm going to live a very long life, and which, it's kind of funny. I have a friend who, she's not terribly spiritual, and she went to an astrologer for reading. This is years ago, she told me, and she said, well, I want to ask you a question. She said, this astrologer said to me, well, I'm really sorry to tell you this, but unfortunately, you're going to live a long life. And she said, why would she say that? I laughed because, living a long life isn't necessarily what we really want to do. Be happy to go.
No, yeah, I was seeing big numbers for you too.
Yeah, and that I will continue. I mean, I've had a really unusual life. I started out in life wanting to be a writer, and now at this late stage, this is the time, and I feel it's all about my cooperating with the spirit world to convey the messages that they want to convey. And I feel like my writing and my rendition of things is different from what's out there. There have been several cultural anthropologists who have lived with the Lakota at times and have written books that are significant books. To my knowledge, I'm the only woman who has written a book on my experiences, which is very different, because women generally write in a more circular rather than a linear way. And I write and I teach by exposing my vulnerabilities. Whereas if a man was writing the book, he wouldn't talk about the heat and the sweat lodge being so bad that he wanted to find an opening to crawl out. And, I really expose my vulnerabilities to make it very real, and hopefully to convey, I don't know, the sincerity that it takes to work with the spirit world.
Yeah.
The spirits really respect sincerity, and not grand gestures, but the everyday gestures of showing up and continuing to show up and show up and show up.
So there is a character in the book, a real woman, a grandmother.
Grandma, yeah.
And I read, you were telling one story after another, and she was in most of them. And she was so alive for me as I read about her. And I went, I wanted to go find scissors. Can I find scissors like that? So you read the book to know about the scissors, but you understood a certain aspect about her.
Yes.
Sitting next to her time after time, and she understood a certain aspect about you. And I feel that because she saw that, and you let her see that in you, she was able to help you transform. That's what
she did. She helped a lot of people transform. I mean, anybody who knew Grandma Chips, I think pretty much had the same experience with her. She was a tough cookie, but she could see into your heart. And she and I we had a bond, and that was it. And the bond was that I was willing to do what it took. I was willing to be sincere. It's funny because most of my life, most of my dearest friends were considerably older than I was. And I was always too serious for the people my age. Of course, now I'm an elder, but unfortunately, when you have friends that are older than you who are teachers and wisdom holders, they transition to the spirit side of life. You have to live without them. But I always think of, I don't know if you remember, if you know Sweet Honey in the Rock, a Black a cappella group. They're out of Washington, D.C., and Bernice Johnson, I think, is Bernice Reagan. I'm not sure now. Bernice is the main singer. They've been around forever, and they have a song about the teachers of my song are moving on. They're moving on to the other side. And when you go, please remember to be in touch with me. But you're not really going to leave me. You're not really going to leave me because you are the air that I breathe. You are the path that I walk. You are the work that I do. I pick up your struggle and we are still together. And this idea of carrying on and being the air that they breathed, and you become the lessons that they taught. And I feel this way about the women in my life who have moved on, women and men in my life who have moved on. And grandma and I just had a deep understanding between us. And because I was always the youngest in the group, even my partner was 8 years older than I was, and she had a lot more experience in different things. But there's an old cereal commercial where you've got the two older siblings and then the young one, and there's cereal on the table, and it's like, well, I don't know, what does it taste like? Do you want this? I don't know, let Mikey have it. Well, it was like, well, let Oshada do it. You know, and that's how it was out on the reservation all the time. It was like, no, let her do it, she'll do it. No, let Oshada do it, we'll just, you know. So I think people respected me though for that willingness to be the one. Okay, I'll do it. And yeah, the grandma she was right here with me almost the entire time I was writing the book, you know.
Oh, how lovely. Oh, how
Yeah.
lovely.
Yeah. Yeah, as a matter of fact, you know, you think, well, how could I remember conversations that happened 35, 40 years ago? Well, it was very simple, because as I went to write conversations, those people who were right here with me, giving me the word, giving me their voice, giving me the way they spoke. So, you know,
Beautiful. That's beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's been a wonderful, I think we could go on for another half an hour, but I think that maybe not. But for just what you're saying is takeaway. There's a lot of takeaways from what you're saying. One of the takeaways, it's been subtle, is that a lot of the teachers that you've had who have been amazing, who are not on the earth plane anymore. And
Yeah.
And that is compelling. Where do we stand now? What do we do? How do you, if you were going to say to somebody, how would you call forward them to be good leaders and good teachers, and have their band of people help others around them? You know,
Easy to answer. You have to spend time apart from society and from the mainstream of life, in communion with the spirit world, in harmony and sync with the spirit world. I know well, you know, from when I met my partner, Deoti, she insisted that I meditate every single day, and I did for decades and decades and decades. And now I still spend time regularly with those on the other side. So cultivating the ability to be quiet, cultivating the discipline to let the chatter up here go. Because some people say I can't meditate because my mind is going a mile a minute. Well, it takes discipline to learn how to let those thoughts move away, because the nature of the mind is to think. The mind is always going to chatter. That's what the mind does. You're not going to get rid of it, but you have to sink underneath it. I always see these thoughts as being like on the surface of the river, and we have to go deeper down into our hearts, down to our lower chakras, and sit in that power, to sit in the power. And I believe that consistency is more important than quantity. So, like making grand gestures to sit for an hour is, first of all, people aren't going to do that every day unless you're really trained to do that. But giving some time, giving 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and because you feel the peace and serenity in those moments, your practice expands to 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and maybe even 20 minutes. But to spend the time learning to be quiet and feeling the impressions of our loved ones on the other side, feeling the impressions, because mediumship and communication is a very subtle thing. And we have to be quiet, and we have to create that space to feel those impressions. So we all have access to those who have gone before us. We all have access to those teachers and those loved ones. And to sit in the silence every day, to make yourself peaceful. That would be my best advice to anybody.
That's perfect. I love that. Come back to yourself through the silence, or come back to spirit, your power center, which is spirit, which is source. Very wise words, and I'm glad that you're here to share those words and encourage people to read your memoir, My Life Among Spirits, and many spirits in many different traditions. And I can imagine if you all put them into one room, it would be very entertaining, very loud.
They're very crowded.
And they would not agree with each other.
Oh no, they would, because they would. Yeah.
Beautiful. And I love the story, and I love the teachings that you've brought, and I hope that everyone listening will reach out to Oshada on her website, or go to Facebook and see what she's all about. She get into her band of people.
Yes.
Come out a little bit more deeper with yourself, a little bit more healed. And I want to thank everyone for listening in at this point. And and is there any last words that you want to say before I close?
Well, I just thank you to you, thank you to all the spirits. And I guess one last thought is that in Lakota, the word, it doesn't translate. We use the word God or intelligence or other words. They refer to the great mystery as Wakan Tanka, and the great spirit. But that is the language is so deep and has so many layers. Wakan refers to that which is mysterious, and we can't touch the mysterious when we're being noisy. So again, back to entering into the silence, going behind the blanket, and spending time with that which is mysterious. Because life is a mysterious journey. It's not just death that's mysterious. All of it is mysterious. So, Wakan Tanka, that which cannot be known, but that which we sit at the foot of, and we feel with our entire being. So I would invite people to sit at the foot of the mysterious with their entire being. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And with that, I invite you all to talk with your soul, talk with your spirit, to walk that path of mystery, and to dig deeper, because we're here to experience these things. Love yourself, explore the mystery of life, and stay in love. And just the end is all I have right now. And thank you for coming on, and can't wait till you're on again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining the Angelscapes podcast. We hope you've gained new insights and inspiration for your journey to uncover and access your soul's power. For more information and a deeper dive into finding clarity in your life, go to angelscapes.com. Remember to subscribe so you can be part of the discussion. It may just change your life. See you next time.